joined today by Nikita Symes from Carebit. Nikita, please, love you to introduce yourself and tell our audience at home a little bit about yourself and Carebit would be great.
Thanks so much, Taylor. I appreciate being invited to share some insights about practice management software with you. So that's what I do. So I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Carebit. We are a practice management software for consultants in private practices, solo practitioners, smaller clinics or larger clinics. I've been with the company for 4 years now. I was the second person as part of the team, so I've seen it grow over the last 4 years, being involved in private practice, and all the consultants and clinicians in this space is exciting. So I love what I do. I enjoy what we're going to talk about today, and hopefully there'll be some helpful information that I've got to share.
Amazing. I'm sure there will be. I know that you work a lot hand in hand with clinicians. So you're on the ground, like really seeing what people are asking for, what they're, coming up against in the, in their practices. From your perspective, talking to these clinic owners, like what do they maybe most misunderstand about practice management software in the beginning?
Yeah, great question. So most people underestimate how much their system shapes how their clinic actually runs. So early on, a practice management software is often seen as a place to store patient records or to manage bookings, rather, something more functional than foundational. But in reality, it defines how your practice runs, how your clinic operates. It's how decisions get made. It's how consistent the experience is for your patients and your staff. And it's how everything comes together in one place. So whether you're a solo consultant or have a small group of clinicians working together, or you've got a larger clinic, the system determines how much you rely on memory versus process. So how visible your operation is and how easy it is to grow, depending on which avenue you'd like to go into. So the misunderstanding is thinking that a practice management software is there to support admin. It's not. It's the operational infrastructure behind your practice. It's the backbone of running that practice.
So it's like I mean, it certainly does help admin, I'm sure, but it's so much more than that. And it's interesting. I mean, I've seen many practices kind of working with spreadsheets and relying on email and, like you say, probably a little bit of memory to kind of keep all the details together. At what point would you say does a clinic outgrow spreadsheets, inboxes, and maybe more basic tools?
Sooner than you would think, right? So when things become complex within the practice, that's kind of when you've outgrown these more simple type of tools that you've added from the very beginning. So a solo practitioner could run on spreadsheets for a certain amount of time. A smaller clinic, because they've perhaps got more admin team, perhaps a little bit longer. But the moment you introduce different revenue streams, so self-pay and insurance billing, or solicitors firms paying certain invoices for patients, or you've got multiple locations, or adding new clinicians to your clinic, you're seeing an increase in patient volume coming from different channels. Or if you need to do any additional delegation to admin staff, manual systems will start to break down in that event. So the tipping point is really where, as we've mentioned, you've got to rely on memory, and there's just a lot more to remember. So then you can no longer confidently answer questions about bookings or billing or patient inquiries because there's just too much to manage. So you've got to check in multiple places to find the answers that you need. And that's when the risk of not having an operating system outweighs the cost of having that in place, right? So you outgrow those more simple tools, but because there's so many and your clinic is growing, it's more difficult to manage. So the cost is in the overhead of time.
Yeah. It almost sounds like you should have it from day one so you don't get into that sticky situation of having to move things over.
That's exactly it. And that's what we do recommend, right? So it should invariably be, it's not a tool that you just think you need because it needs to manage your patient records or your bookings. It is the operational infrastructure behind your practice. And the sooner you can have that implemented, the easier your growth is going to be, and the easier the admin is going to be, and the better the patient experience will be.
So you mentioned kind of system design. So it's obviously it's always incredibly important to design your systems well. So why does poor system design become a growth limiter before most founders would expect it?
If your systems are weak, every new patient that you add increases operational load disproportionately. So your admin work expands, your clinician needs to be available for work outside of a clinical role, whether that's assisting with admin or more manual letter writing processes and even billing. So that will just slow everything down. Whereas growth should increase your output and your margin, and poor systems convert that into friction. So if you've got one system and it manages the entire workflow, you won't introduce that system and it doesn't impact your growth. So what often surprises people is that the clinic can feel busy and it can feel successful, but internally it's harder to run. So it's usually a sign that a system is not scaling with the business. And that's why it's so important to have it, like you mentioned, from the very beginning.
So you've already talked about kind of some of the things that you see that are happening, related to like a broken PMS setup or a broken operating system. Is there anything else that you'd like? What are the telltale signs if you're diagnosing a struggling clinic that the operational systems are failing, and point to like something that a practice management software could actually fix?
Yeah, great question. And I think sometimes when you are running a busy practice, you just take that as a given, these pain points, and they shouldn't really be. So we've spoken about this already, but admin teams having to rely on memory or manual tracking, patients that are calling in to chase their letters or referrals or even their invoices, right? Clinicians that often don't trust the data that's in front of them because they're not quite sure if it is accurate and up to date. Your billing is delayed, so your cash flow stagnates in the practice. Reporting is not available, or it is there, but the data is not accurate because everything has been slowed down by these broken systems that you have in place. And everyone is just almost in a kind of state of panic all the time. But because things are busy, you think it's the norm, but it shouldn't be. So the common theme is, lack of consistency in everyone being on the same page. So when a system is not doing its job, people compensate for that. And then that compensation becomes the hidden cost, and that can compound very quickly into burned out teams, unhappy patients, and clinicians doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And that is very indicative of a broken setup, right? You want to have a strong backbone there so you don't have to have any of those outcomes we've mentioned.
Yeah. Well, so that's all the bad stuff that can happen. So let's imagine the perfect world now. So the project management software, it's the clinic's operating spine. You mentioned the backbone of a clinic. So like in practical terms, unpack that a little bit. Like what does it actually mean? How is it like really, I guess, at the core of everything?
So, I mean, if we, because we are obviously having a discussion about private practice, right? So if we can imagine the backbone in the human body, right, it keeps everything together. Everything flows from it, your senses, your movement, your whole body functions through that backbone. So that is what your practice management software should be. It's the entire operating system behind your practice. Everything flows through that system. So from the first booking or patient registration to first booking, to the letters going out to the patient, to the billing, and then the reporting. The practice management system should be where all of those processes connect. So it doesn't just store information, it structures where and when things happen and how they happen. So for a solo consultant, this naturally means not having to rely on memory and, I need to do this and I need to invoice that patient, or the admin teams chasing back and forth with their clinicians to see where they are. Have they seen this patient? Have they ordered a test? For a larger clinic, it could mean aligning a lot of people and workflows across the operating model so that everyone is just on the same page. So your practice management software being the backbone of your practice means everyone is aligned from when the patient registers with the practice right up until year-end reporting.
Okay, so it really is that it's the nexus of everything, but it also has some like functional, things that it must do. So what would you say are like the core functions that a modern PMS system should have if a clinic wants to be able to scale sustainably?
Yeah. So we all know what a practice management software should do, right? But if in order for the clinic to grow, you need to be able to see scheduling and diary management, but that actually really reflects the capacity of the practice. You also want to have a structured patient record where there's no duplication of patient records or documentation or communications that are buried and difficult to find. Automated and consistent professional patient communication is incredibly important in private practice. Billing workflows that match how private healthcare actually works. So a self-pay workflow, an insurance billing workflow, everyone knowing what they need to pay and when, and ensuring that those invoices are raised and paid in a timely manner so as to not impact the cash flow of a practice. And then, of course, reporting that actually reflects the operational reality of that practice, right? So there's all these individual features that a practice management software needs to have in place to work and support, be that backbone for a private practice. I think almost more importantly than that is how they all come together, how they connect, right? So the system should reduce duplication and handoff to humans. It shouldn't create additional work. And if that is all in harmony, then the core function of a practice management software is doing its job.
And you talked about capacity and utilization and scheduling a little bit. So how does this help with actually, I guess, maximizing that? So seeing, I guess the maximum amount of patients that you can see without burning out and, helping the admin teams and all that. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, capacity is one of the most undermanaged parts of private practice. So every clinic has its constraints, right? We've only got so much time, rooms, clinicians, and admin support to support those patients. So a practice management software should really make those constraints visible and manageable. So you want to see how clinic time is structured, how much of that time is actually being filled with patients that are making bookings. What is your booking to appointment time? Where are cancellations happening? Why are they happening? Where are these gaps coming from? And then how demand maps to the availability of the clinicians within the clinic, right? If you've got a 6 month waiting list, how can you improve that time? So scheduling is not just operational or part of the journey, it's commercial. It determines how efficiently the clinic is converting demand into revenue. And if you've got all that data at your fingertips, the right data, then you can make good decisions based on that. So that you're filling your diary with the right patients at the right time, and making sure that everyone is being seen when they need to be seen.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I think we're going to talk about data a little bit more kind of coming up there, but maybe that's actually part of my next question is kind of like, so what does good look like when practice management software is really implemented properly? Like what do behind the scenes feel like?
Oh man, Taylor, it's a great question. And if we could use one word, I'd say good looks like calm. So when a clinic feels calm, patients receive clear communication, they know where to go, they know when they need to be there, they know what to bring with them. Admin teams know exactly what they need to do and when. They don't need to constantly be checking their task lists or emails for tasks that may be coming through, or even WhatsApp, right? Clinicians trust their schedules and they trust the data that's in front of them. They know the latest test result in the patient record is what they need to review. They don't have to go and search for information. Billing flows naturally, so that's quite seamless. Invoices are created, payments are received, payouts happen to whoever needs to receive those payouts when they need to receive them. And then the clinic owner, whether that's the solo practitioner or the leadership within a larger clinic, they know exactly what's happening within the practice at all times. So it's less firefighting, fewer surprises, And the system is actually just absorbing complexity rather than exposing it, right? So it's taking those complex, because the patient journey is a complex journey, and it's just simplifying it so everyone knows exactly what they need to know, when they need to know it, and they've got everything at their fingertips.
Well, perfect segue. I was just about to kind of get into the patient journey and the patient experience. So, we talked more about kind of how it feels internally. So maybe more externally, like how does a PMS design influence the patient confidence and experience? Even if they don't really see the system itself.
Consultants or clinicians or clinic owners may think that the patients don't interact with the practice management software, but they do. They rarely see the system directly, but they feel effects of the system at every point in the patient journey. So how easy it is to book, how clear the communication is about their bookings or letters or billing, whether that information is consistent, and how smoothly their follow-up happens or discharge happens, or just access to their information. So when systems are well designed, patients feel guided, they feel reassured, they don't need to seek assurance. So less phone calls to the medical secretaries or practice managers because patients are confused and need assistance. Everything is just calm. And that is how a practice management software influences the patient experience. It is in every single interaction.
Where do clinics most commonly introduce friction into the patient journey through poor systems? Like, what are the red flags that you've seen out there that we can solve with a great PMS system?
I think this also goes back to having the operating systems, having your practice management system as the operating system to your practice, right? If it's managing the entire patient journey, there is simplicity in communication and the process. So where friction is introduced is most often in disjointed or fragmented communications, or in over communicating to patients, right? Thereby causing them to feel a bit confused. Inconsistency in information between admin staff and clinical staff in the clinic, delaying patients coming in for follow-ups, missing patients that need to come back for recall bookings in 6 months or 12 months because they've fallen through the cracks. And then, of course, billing that is just slow and delayed. So very rarely are these friction points clinical, but they cause operational gaps. And if you have a strong system in place, those gaps won't happen. And you don't have to then rely on manual intervention and memory to pull that back.
So you talk about, obviously, communication is major then. So how important is automated communication in managing patient anxiety and expectations?
Yeah, great question. And I think, here is where balance is key. So automated communication is incredibly important and such a powerful tool, but if it is deployed correctly and properly, right? So automation should ensure that the patient has the information when they need it, and they know what they need to know when they need to know it. But conversely, if there's too much automation and communication and too many messages going out to patients, that can lead them to feeling overwhelmed and confused, right? So patients want clarity and predictability, and you need to make sure that the automation that's set up supports that feeling for the patient. So you don't want to over-automate, if I could use that term. Too many messages or poorly timed communications can create confusion. You want to use automation to reassure the patient, have consistency in your communication, and ensure that it is a tool used so that the patients don't have to phone in and ring in. They've got all the answers that they need. And if there is information that they do need outside of the communication, they've got the bandwidth to pick up the phone and ring the practice manager or the secretary. And the secretary has bandwidth to help them as well.
So how do you find that balance? Or what's the best way to kind of design that system, maybe, so that that's not, all those issues aren't happening?
Yeah. So it's, if we think about it this way, systems are really good at managing predictable workflows, and then you can keep the humans in the practice to handle the nuance. So workflows like booking reminders, follow-up reminders, recall appointment reminders, anything that is predictable, let the automation take care of that. And like I mentioned previously, the humans in the practice can then handle that nuance, the patients ringing in that have got additional questions or are a little bit anxious ahead of a procedure, or even a family member of a patient that just wants a bit more information. That's where the human touch becomes invaluable. And the only way that you can offer that human touch on a really connected level is if you've got the automation managing those predictable workflows. So automation actually improves the human experience because it reduces that friction, and it frees up time for the practice managers and secretaries and even clinicians to have those calls.
Talking about like the other systems and how it kind of works with other systems in the clinic. I think, some people often confuse like practice management software, customer relationship management, CRM software, and there can be big differences. Mm-hmm. How should we be thinking about like the differences between these different bits of kit?
The distinction is quite simple, but it is really important to know the difference, right? So CRM is handling the relationship before that individual becomes a patient, and the practice management software, or PMS, is handling that relationship after the individual has become a patient. So prior to that, it could be anything from inquiries, general information, how to, segment them for marketing. And then as soon as that patient or that individual converts to a patient, and at Carebit, we see that as them making a booking, that is then where it hands over to patient record management. So patient information, clinical information, medical letters. So a CRM will help convert those individuals into bookings, which would then land in the practice management software. So it's CRM is prior to the patient's care journey commencing. So there is a bit of an overlap. They do serve different roles, but they're equally important, especially in larger clinics.
Yeah, and how should the practice management software integrate with the marketing systems without becoming messy, or that how do you bridge that gap?
I think there are needs. The needs vary across different sizes of practice. So a solo practitioner, for example, may have a way more simplified version of a CRM that they could use, whereas a large clinic with multiple different disciplines or specialties that are on offer to patients with many different streams of patient inquiries coming in, they might need a more robust CRM software. And you'd like the CRM software to talk to the practice management software so that conversion from inquiry to patient is seamless for those admin members within the practice. So you do want those systems to be integrated with minimal overlap. So again, it's not duplication of work and causing more work than what it needs to do.
What problems do you see when clinics try to, force one system to do everything?
I think especially when it comes to CRM and practice management software, it's dependent on the practice size, right? If you're a solo practitioner or a solo consultant in private practice, you can use a system like Carebit where we've got a CRM feature within the system that you can use, and that will work really well for the size of your practice and you being the solo clinician. For a larger clinic, they may need something more robust. We touched on that earlier. They may have multiple specialties within the practice, many different marketing channels to which they are marketing to prospective patients. So you don't want to compromise their own workflow. You want to make sure that the two systems are always talking to each other. You want to make sure that you can always see what the source of your bookings are, the source of your patients that are coming in, and repeat activity. And that's going to best position you to make the correct marketing choices going forward. And whatever that CRM is that you use, whether it's part of your practice management tool or an independent CRM, as long as it meets the needs of what you want to achieve in your practice and how you'd like to attract those patients, that's the tool you should go for. My only advice is that if they can talk to each other, that's going to be massively more advantageous for the practice.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that we really focus on at Katie Webb, is like tracking that whole journey from even, the keywords people are putting into Google all the way through to how much they end up spending a year after becoming a patient. So it's collecting that data so that you can make those smart choices, which, again, perfect segue to the next section here. We talked a lot about the kind of data that practice management software can collect. So how do we turn that data into operational clarity? So what sort of data should clinic leaders be looking at from their practice management software?
You're right there, Taylor, where you say the practice management software has a lot of data, which is a good thing. However, I do recommend that clinic owners or solo consultants in their private practice decide what metrics are important, and then you look into those reports. So metrics like capacity and utilization, that's obviously going to tell you everything you need to know about your clinic, right? Cancellations and no-shows, why are they happening? When are they happening? What are the early indicators that this might happen, so you can prevent that? Time from booking to appointment, because if the longer patients wait for that appointment, are they going to be a DNA? Are they not? Are they going to cancel the booking? What is the effect of that time, and where is the sweet spot? We all know there are waiting lists, but if we can manage that in private practice, again, it's going to feed into capacity and utilization. So billing speed and cash flow, incredibly important for a sustainable practice. And then revenue by service type and by clinician. So you can quickly identify what's working and what's not working, and really hone the services to what your patients are booking, and meet that capacity and utilization. So they all tend to go together. Those are the primary ones I would say are worth looking at. But again, it depends on the clinic. What do you want to track? Where are you going? And then choose those metrics that will give you the visibility that you need to make the decisions to grow in the direction that you plan on growing into.
Yeah. So how else can those are great examples, but how else can PMS data help founders spot those maybe admin bottlenecks or other bottlenecks before they become painful?
So a good practice management software will reveal patterns early on. So you'd be able to see if there's consistent gaps in your clinic, why are those gaps happening, and how can you close those gaps? Services that underperform. So if there are appointment types that aren't being booked, why aren't they being booked? What else can you offer? And then conversely, on the other side, what is the demand, and how can you better meet that? Cancellations, if that is increasing, delays between appointments and billing, that is a mega bottleneck in private practice, right? We see a lot of practices with sluggish billing, and these appointments have already occurred. Your practice management software is going to be able to identify that for you. So these signals will allow you to intervene before the problem escalates. And the only way that you can really have oversight of these bottlenecks is if you've got a practice management software that is your operating system and can give you all of these signals before they become painful.
I mean, I guess you've already kind of touched on data overload, but why do so many clinics maybe collect data but still feel blind? How do you organize it into what matters most for you?
With practice management software not having been around, let's say 10 years ago, or maybe there was, but it was fairly simple, right? Patient record management and letters. So the data or the reports that we had were either late or not complete, right? So at the moment, if practices feel like they're flying blind, it could be because they don't trust the data because of bad historical experiences, or the data is just not structured in a way that makes sense and is meaningful to the clinic owners or solo practitioners. So you're looking at all of this information, but it's just not actually contributing to good decision making in the practice. So your data needs to be consistent. You need to be able to find it easily. You need to be able to easily understand the data. That then it can really provide good operational insights into what you want to do. Again, looking at the metrics that matter. It needs to be easy to read. You need to have it on time. You need to be able to find it as easy as possible and trust that it is all there. And the only way that you can really trust that the data or the output is something you can rely on to make good decisions is if you've got all the information entered into the system correctly from the beginning. Again, having a good operating system that manages the entire journey is going to mean that the reports at the end of the day are comprehensive and will contribute to you being able to trust that information to make good decisions.
So one thing that we've seen with clinics sometimes is the idea of kind of change. Change is difficult. So talking about like moving to a new practice management software, when is the right time for a clinic to maybe upgrade or change their practice management software?
That is a great question. And if I could really pin down when the right time was, I would publicize that to the whole world. I think each practice is different and timing is different for every single person within the practice as well, right? So change is difficult, and the private practice, it doesn't stop when you need to make that change. But a recommendation is to make the change before things get too painful, before you outgrow the systems. So don't wait until the problems are obvious. Think about where you're going. Think about how private practice is changing, how the patient expectations are changing, and just get ahead of that pain that's coming.
So talking about change, then it's like, so what are the telltale signs that are like, okay, we gotta get rid of this system and go to a newer, better system?
The telltale signs would be different according to practice size, but the most, I would say maybe the top 3 signs that you have to move is if you are outgrowing your practice management software or the systems that you're using. If you're finding yourself having to rely too heavily on admin, or the systems are clunky that they actually don't facilitate a good workflow within your practice, it's time to move on or just explore other alternatives. When there's new technology that's available that your current setup cannot offer or cannot cope with, then perhaps time to move on. And I suppose another really big indicator is if you've got unhappy patients, right? Patients will tell you if your systems are becoming a bit of a constraint. They'll be phoning in more regularly for updates. They'll be chasing you. Your billing flow will be stagnant. So your patients will tell you, but also you'll feel it if you are just working in your practice on a day-to-day basis and you sit there and go, oh my goodness, this just feels like hard work.
Yeah. Stress sounds the telltale sign.
The secretary will tell the doctor when the system needs to change.
Yeah. So what mistakes have you seen clinics make when migrating from one system to another?
What mistakes we've seen. So I think a lot of times a practice or a clinic will see a migration as a technical task versus an operational undertaking across the entire practice, right? So there's a few things to consider in migration. You first need to ensure that you are finding the right system that's going to work for the practice and where you want to go. You need to make sure that everyone within your practice is trained up on what they need to know of the new system, that everyone is prepared for the migration, and that everyone understands that after the migration has happened and you've moved to the new system, that there are going to be some ebbs and flows, and sometimes you're going to know the answer and sometimes not, and that's okay. It's part of the change. So one of biggest mistakes I see is that you're not quite prepared for the internal change or the operational change that happens with a migration. We all just think it's data going from one system to the other, but it's actually not. It's an entire workflow that's changing within the practice.
And I guess that is kind of one of the biggest, maybe scary things. And so how do you manage that change without kind of upsetting the staff or disrupting patients?
So I think there's 2 parts to this question, or to the answer to the question, right? So there's the practice management systems obligation to guide the clinic owner or solo practitioner through the process. So to explain to them what the process is, to clarify expectations, to ensure there's open communication across timelines, to provide training and support during the process. Because the teams the teams behind the practice management software would probably have done this on a daily basis, perhaps 2 to 3 times a day. So they know what it's about. Where on the other side, this clinic that's migrating or the practice that's migrating, this might have been the only time they've ever done a migration, right? Or they may have had a previous bad experience with a migration. So the responsibility on the practice management system to provide a smooth transition is part one. And then on the other side, from within the clinic, it's just to communicate across the team. Why is the change happening? When is it happening? Who is involved? How you need to prepare? What's going to happen on the day of? What's going to happen afterwards? So that everyone within that practice or clinic feels supported and feels aligned. They know who to ask and where to go if they need questions. And, just to be able to prioritize stability in the early stages, right? So we know it's going to happen today. This is what will happen. If A, B, and C happens, if D, E, and F happens, you follow a different journey. So just remaining calm, but keeping everyone on the same page within the clinic and that you're all in it together.
And so I guess realistically, what should a clinic leader expect from a project management software implementation project?
Definitely progress. It's not perfect from the outset, right? There's always going to be, it's change. So going from system A to system B is brand new. So you're not going to be as fast as what you were, but you will get faster. You're not going to be able to, there might be a new workflow, there may be a new introduction of way of doing things. But every time you interact with that new practice management software, you will get faster, you will get better, things will make more sense as you go. So efficiency will improve over time, but it's not going to be immediate. No matter how much training and effort you put in beforehand, it can only set you up for better success down the road. But progress only happens when you actually use the system in the day-to-day running of the practice or clinic.
Let's talk about mistakes and things that go wrong. We want to help people avoid here. What would you say are the most common practice management software mistakes you've seen clinics make as they grow?
So first and foremost, I think it's thinking that the system that you use is secondary. It's just a tool to your practice. It's something you may need to manage part 1 and 2 of the patient journey and not the whole patient journey, so quite fragmented in that sense, which then again also leads itself to inadequate configuration and setup of the system. So if you don't do that and do it well from the very beginning, you're going to be chasing your tail. So it's worthwhile to do the configuration and set it up, and also set it up for where you want the clinic to be in a year's time or 2 years' time. Really think about how you're setting up your services, how you're setting up your prices, how you're creating the automation. That needs to be mapped to your patient journey, not just configuring settings on a setting by setting basis. I think another thing that clinics need to be mindful of is lack of standardization and training of best practices amongst the staff within that clinic. So each person may do things a little bit differently or find their own way, but the practice management software should be configured in a way that best practices are always followed. Each patient has the same journey and the same experience, even if the admin team are doing things a little bit differently. The practice management system provides the guardrails to do it within the scope of standardization that the clinic or the practitioner would like in the practice.
That makes a lot of sense. Make it impossible for admin staff to do anything wrong, it sounds like.
Exactly, 100%, yeah.
What decisions maybe seem really small early on, but can cause major problems later, I guess, when we're talking about configuration?
Mm-hmm. Excellent question. And if this is one thing that everyone could take away from this call is ensuring that your services are set up correctly. So what services do you provide? How much do they cost? When do you provide them, and where do you provide them? That diary and scheduling structure is the absolute bedrock of how your practice is going to be managed. So if you get that right from day one, everything else flows a lot easier. What other things would be important? So ensuring as well that your templates that you use are consistent and professional, making sure your branding is where it needs to be, and then of course setting up the automation to provide predictable communication to your patients. So these things may seem small, but as your clinic grows and as you see more patients and have more bookings, etc., it's really just gonna shape things downstream and make it easier.
So what would you say are the biggest mistakes you've seen that people have done with setting up their practice management softwares? Tell us some horror stories.
Oh my goodness. So for solo practitioners, I think some of the mistakes are not setting up the system properly, so not adding all the services or not adding all the insurance billing information or the CCSD and ISC codes, for example. And then I think in larger clinics, it's too many people configuring the system but not talking to each other. So person A may be doing something in one way and person B is doing the same thing but in a different way. And then we kind of all jump on a call at the end of the day and we go, okay, so now we need to rip out and refit, right? Everyone needs to be aligned, and you really have to sit down and think about, right, we're moving to a new system or we're using a new system. What does this look like? Where do we want to be in 6 months, 12 months, 2 years' time? How do we want our patients to feel? What's going to be best for my practice manager? What does the consultant want to see? And then I think also importantly, what is important in terms of data in, right? You've got to make sure that what you put in there is meaningful and comprehensive.
That makes sense. So looking ahead, there's so much going on with AI and everything with all types of technology. So what do you see, practice management evolving over the next 5 years?
Oh, Taylor, it is so exciting to see how things are changing. If I've just seen how it's changed in the last 12 months with AI coming into the mix, it's going to be a really exciting next few years. So we're moving away from more being just patient record management or a scheduling tool or some place to manage your billing from, to becoming that operating platform, the backbone for a private practice that then provides insight and guidance on how to improve the clinic going forward. The practice management software is going to become more vital in identifying patterns and suggesting actions for where to take the practice next, what's working, what's not working, and be that tool to provide the operational insight. So the clinical component is left to the clinicians.
So where could that create, where could that go wrong? Where does, automation and relying on AI maybe too much, where does it maybe help? And then where can it create risk, and how should we kind of navigate and think about that?
Excellent question, and very much on everyone's lips, right? So where automation or AI can help a practice, whether it's a smaller practice or a large clinic, can help with communication, scheduling workflows, billing workflows, communication workflows, anything that is predictable and consistent. That is where it's going to be your best friend. What that does is, if the practice management software, the automation and the AI within that software takes care of those repetitive actions, the clinical side is still taken care of by the clinicians in the practice. So AI or automation should not replace judgment, and it should not replace human oversight or those human interactions that you need to have with your patients.
So if a clinic owner did just one thing differently with their systems after reading this chapter, what should it be?
I would say practice management software needs to be treated as the infrastructure behind your private practice. Think about a system early on, design it to suit the scale that you'd like to achieve within your practice, and know that it's the backbone of where you're going and how you want to run your practice. So think about it early, adopt it early, configure it well, let it support your growth. That's what it's there for.
So following on from that, I guess is like, well, how do you do that? Like where, I think something that we come up against is, the consultants we work with, sometimes they want an out of the box solution, or they want it to be like, kind of done for them sometimes. And because they're not the experts on system design and, project management and all this sort of thing. So like, how would you practically, do you need to hire a consultant? Is that something that, it does kind of come out of the box with? Maybe just talk a little bit about how do you make sure that you are doing it right? You're getting it configured the way that it needs to be and not making these mistakes, I guess.
It depends on the size of your practice and what you're looking for, right? How busy you currently are, but you need to make the change. So one of the big things to think about is if you do choose a practice management software and you are a solo practitioner, or you've got a smaller practice with 3 to 5 clinicians, you can then speak to the team behind the practice management software, do a discovery call with them, and they will help you configure the account. The configuration shouldn't take long. It should be that the software that you choose will support you, and it should be easy enough to input the information so that the system can kind of do the work in the background for you, or the teams behind that system. If you are a larger clinic and you do want to get a consultant on board, that's fine as well. In my experience and how we do things at Carebit is we want to work directly with those clinics. It depends on the system that you choose. It depends on where you want to go and what you want to achieve. But I think ultimately, as long as you've got someone that is truly going to listen to how you run your practice, how you want to run your practice, and they know the system inside out so that you're set up for the best possible success from that first config call, that's who you need to go for and who you need to talk to.
Right. So I feel like you're doing a really good job of not doing the hard sell on Carebit, but you did kind of let something which I really appreciate, because this is for kind of, everybody and software agnostic. But I think that is a really important thing. So you're saying with if you do choose Carebit, maybe here's your time for your pitch on Carebit is, so it sounds like you guys will actually work with them to design the system and make sure that it's working well. And that's probably a deciding factor of which system you choose, is which ones are going to support you in that way, perhaps. So maybe just talk about that a little bit, about what do you guys do at Carebit to make sure that happens? So you actually sit down with them and help them work through all this stuff?
It really depends, Taylor. So if we just zoom out a little bit and we look at who these individuals are, right? So it's clinicians, healthcare practitioners, consultants in private practice. We're in the business of care, right? So we, as practice management software providers, we need to care about these individuals who are caring about other human beings. And the way we do that is by making ourselves available to them if they need help, but also we're building a tool that they should be able to set up themselves as well without getting caught or going down a rabbit hole. So at Carebit, we have an onboarding program that consultants and their practice managers or the teams behind them can go through on their own time. It's really straightforward. It explains everything step by step. But behind that, we've got a support team who are available via email and phone line, which is actually really underrated in private practice, in the private practice space, right? Is a technology provider having a support line for consultants to call. You'll be surprised how many don't have that. But make yourselves available for those questions that they can't answer themselves, because if they can't get hold of you, what's going to happen 3 months down the line if they've got a patient in front of them and they need urgent help? So you've got to set that tone from the very beginning to say, hang on, this system or this platform is user-friendly enough that you can go and set it up yourself, But if you need help or you've got extra questions, here is someone that you can get hold of. And that's really the ethos of Carebit is we have really good support, but we've got a really intuitive interface where clinicians, consultants, practice managers, secretaries, billing teams know what to do. It's clear. There's a process. They follow that and they fly.
In your experience, just to wrap it all up, what does the well-run clinic feel like when all these systems are truly working?
Oh, that is just the best feeling in the world when we hear that back from individuals that use a practice management tool, right? So the clinic feels calm, it's clear and consistent. People know what is happening. Patients feel looked after, and the system is supporting the work rather than creating more work. So everyone has time to do what they need to do, but the system is taking care of the repetitive work that always had to be done, but no longer needs to be done. So consultants are spending a little bit more time with their patients. Secretaries or practice managers are spending a little bit more time answering questions or connecting with those patients. Patients are happier, being seen more quickly, having all the information they need. Everyone is just calm, everything works, everything is consistent and professional, and the entire experience across the private practice is next level.
Well, that sounds like a perfect, happy way to end this conversation. Thank you so much for your time, Nikita. This has been really great and a lot of fantastic insights there on practice management software. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Taylor. Appreciate it.